A racist billionaire refuses to stand for judge. The courtroom fell silent. A racist billionaire smirked, refusing to stand for the judge, his arrogance dripping with entitlement. But what he didn't know? This judge had spent her entire career taking down men like him, and when she finally responded, the entire courtroom erupted in chaos. The air in courtroom 305 hangs heavy with tension, not the usual nervous energy of justice in process, something more electric, more dangerous. Judge Elaine Washington's footsteps echo against marble as she approaches her bench, each measured step carrying the weight of a journey most will never understand. At 52, Judge Washington's face tells a story, keen eyes that have witnessed decades of injustice from behind that bench, each line on her face earned through battles fought in whispers and legal briefs that the public never sees. This isn't just any courthouse. These mahogany walls have heard testimonies of racial discrimination since the 1960s civil rights era, the same courthouse where her father once wasn't allowed to drink from the main water fountain while serving as a janitor. All rise for the Honorable Judge Elaine Washington. The gallery stands in unison. Attorneys straighten their postures. Court officers stiffen to attention. All except one man. Maxwell Stone, tech billionaire and defendant in a massive discrimination lawsuit, remains seated, his calculated disrespect evident in his relaxed posture and slight smirk. His company, PrimeTech, stands accused of systematic discrimination against black employees who were denied promotions despite superior qualifications. Their crime? Being the wrong fit for leadership. The courtroom temperature seems to drop as Stone's cold blue eyes lock with Judge Washington's. His Italian suit probably costs more than what most people in this room make in a month. His posture isn't just casual, it's dismissive, a physical manifestation of privilege that has never faced meaningful consequence. Judge Washington doesn't immediately react as protocol demands. No sharp reprimand, no banging gavel. Instead, she studies Stone with the measured patience of someone who has faced this brand of entitlement before, a silent calculation passing behind her eyes. The courtroom remains suspended in tension, court officers uncertain whether to intervene, Stone's high-powered attorneys shifting uncomfortably in Italian leather shoes worth thousands, and the plaintiffs watching with a familiar pain of seeing privilege display itself so boldly. They've seen this before, just never so brazenly in a temple of justice. What the courtroom doesn't know. In her chambers, Judge Washington has reviewed evidence revealing Stone's private communications about keeping certain types in their place, and records showing qualified black employees systematically relegated to lower positions despite outperforming their white counterparts. More critically, she's uncovered what Stone's team has desperately tried to hide, a connection between his discriminatory practices and his father's involvement in fighting against integration in the 1970s. The apple hasn't fallen far from that poisoned tree. Rather than demanding immediate respect through her position, Judge Washington begins with a calm question that catches everyone off guard. Mr. Stone, would you consider yourself a patriot? The question seems bizarrely off-topic, yet delivered with deliberate precision. The courtroom collectively holds its breath. Stone, momentarily confused but arrogant, responds confidently, "Absolutely, Your Honor. I've created thousands of American jobs." Judge Washington nods thoughtfully, her fingers lightly tapping the bench. "Then perhaps you can help me understand why the American justice system you claim to respect doesn't deserve the basic courtesy of standing when its representative enters." Before Stone can respond, Judge Washington continues, her voice carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent room. "This isn't about me, Mr. Stone. This bench represents a system that, despite its imperfections, strives for equality. Your choice to remain seated speaks volumes about what you think of that ideal." The gallery erupts in whispers as Stone's face reddens, not from shame, but from fury at being questioned by a black woman in a position of authority. This wasn't how people spoke to Maxwell Stone, ever. His attorneys frantically whisper to him, aware his disrespect has already damaged their case before it's begun. One passes him a note, another tugs discreetly at his sleeve. Judge Washington's approach wasn't what anyone expected. Not outrage, not immediate punishment, but a surgical exposure of the exact mindset that brought him to court in the first place. It's a chess move when everyone expected checkers. As court officers restore order and the first day of what promises to be a landmark case begins, the plaintiffs exchange glances of cautious hope. Desiree Reynolds, once PrimeTech's most promising software developer now fighting for her career, feels something she hasn't in months. Possibility. Perhaps this time would be different. Perhaps this judge wouldn't be blinded by Stone's wealth and influence. What no one in that courtroom realizes is how much Judge Washington has already sacrificed to be in that seat today, or how much more she stands to lose before justice has its day. 3 days into the trial, and the battlefield has expanded far beyond Courtroom 305. Judge Elaine Washington sits alone in her chambers at midnight, the harsh ring of her phone cutting through the silence. The voice on the other end belongs to Justice William Matthews, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and her old law school colleague. "Elaine, this call isn't happening officially." His voice carries the weight of implied power. "There's concern at the highest levels about the appearance of impartiality in the Stone case. Have you considered recusal might be the prudent choice here?" Judge Washington's hand tightens around the receiver. The message couldn't be clearer. Powerful interests are concerned about her handling of a billionaire's case. The suggestion wraps itself in the language of propriety, but the meaning is naked. Step aside or face consequences. After hanging up, Judge Washington stares at her reflection in the darkened window. The city lights blur behind her image, mirroring her internal struggle. We see a younger Elaine, top of her class at Harvard Law, being passed over for partnership at Crawford and Bennett, despite having the firm's best case record. "We just don't think you're ready for the responsibility yet," says the managing partner, as a white male colleague with fewer wins is celebrated in the next room. Years later, we see her watching from a courthouse gallery as Judge Michael Sullivan, who graduated below her, receives his federal appointment before her, despite her superior qualifications. These aren't just memories, they're wounds that shaped her. Has her commitment to fairness cost her advancement? Will taking on Stone lead to her career's undoing? The question weighs heavily as she reviews case notes deep into the night. Court transcripts reveal Stone's pattern of discrimination goes beyond race. Older employees and pregnant women were also systematically sidelined. Marcus Chen, the plaintiff's lead attorney, presents email chains showing qualified candidates were coded as not the right culture fit when they were people of color. Your Honor, PrimeTech's own internal audit showed 62% of employees from minority backgrounds remained in entry-level positions after 5 years, compared to 24% of white employees with identical performance ratings, Chen argues, his voice steady but urgent. Stone's legal team employs every delay tactic available, overwhelming the court with unnecessary motions, demanding excessive time for document review, raising obscure procedural challenges. Their strategy isn't to win on facts, but to exhaust resources and patience. Desiree Reynolds takes the stand on day 5, her hands trembling slightly as she's sworn in. Once PrimeTech's most promising software developer, she describes attending a company retreat where Stone was present. 2 days after Mr. Stone commented on how surprising it was to see someone like me leading the encryption team, my projects were reassigned, she testifies. Within 3 months, I was reporting to Jacob Winters, who had previously been my junior. Stone's attorneys attempt to paint her as disgruntled, but Judge Washington allows her to share email evidence showing her code had outperformed colleagues who were later promoted above her. Mr. Stone personally reviews all senior promotions, Desiree adds, her voice gaining strength. That's not company rumor, it's company policy. Outside the marble walls of justice, Stone's PR machine works overtime. News segments question Judge Washington's impartiality, with commentators asking whether a judge of color can truly be neutral in a discrimination case. Websites dig into her past rulings and personal life. Social media floods with attacks on both the judge and plaintiffs. Desiree finds her professional reputation under attack through anonymous online posts claiming she was fired for incompetence, a complete fabrication. When she tries to counter these claims, the attacks intensify, suggesting she's playing the race card to cover for professional inadequacy. Judge Washington's 25-year-old daughter, Zora, slams her laptop closed, face flushed with anger. "They're saying you only got your position because of affirmative action," she tells her mother. "The comments are vile, Mum. You need to withdraw from this case. It's not safe." "Cases aren't assigned based on safety," Judge Washington responds, though the strain is evident in her voice. "This isn't just about the case anymore." Zora's voice rises. "Our address is being shared in these forums. Your generation thinks suffering in silence is noble. My generation knows better." Their heated argument reveals the generational difference in approaching racism. Zora's insistence on self-protection versus her mother's commitment to using her position to create change. That evening, Judge Washington finds an envelope on her car windshield. Inside, photos of her home, Zora entering her law school, and her elderly father at his assisted living facility. No note, the message is clear enough. That night, hands shaking, she visits her 80-year-old father, who still keeps his old janitor uniform from the courthouse in a glass frame, a reminder of where they started. "Should I step away from the case, Dad?" she asks, vulnerability showing through her judicial composure. Her father's weathered hands close over hers. "They've always used fear, Elaine. The question is whether fear will use you." Meanwhile, Stone grows increasingly confident during a court recess. Believing himself unobserved, he tells his attorney, "She'll back down." They always do when they realize who really runs things. The case takes an unexpected turn when Richard Harmon, former PrimeTech executive, comes forward. Initially appearing supportive of Stone, his testimony starts favorably, describing Stone as demanding but fair. But when cross-examined about specific hiring practices, his carefully constructed responses begin to unravel. Judge Washington notices Harmon's discomfort and asks directly about performance review processes. His answer inadvertently reveals that qualified black candidates were coded as not culture fits, a seemingly neutral term concealing discriminatory intent. Stone's expression darkens at this slip. For the first time, he appears genuinely concerned as he whispers urgently to his legal team. As Day 10 concludes, Judge Washington receives an official letter. A judicial conduct review has been initiated against her, citing inappropriate questioning and perceived bias. The complaint comes from a judicial committee headed by Judge Wilson Thornton, who regularly attends fundraising galas hosted by Stone's largest shareholder. As Judge Washington leaves the courthouse that evening, protesters on both sides have gathered, some supporting the plaintiffs, others calling for her removal. Signs read "Equal Justice" alongside others demanding "unbiased courts." Among the hostile crowd, she spots her daughter Zora, who has unexpectedly shown up in solidarity despite their argument. Their eyes meet across the divide, a moment of recognition that some battles must be fought regardless of the cost. Zora gives a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that her mother's fight matters, even if it comes with risk. The battle lines are drawn not just in the courtroom, but through media, backroom pressure, and now the very system of judicial oversight meant to ensure fairness. For Judge Washington, the road ahead promises to be treacherous, but turning back is no longer an option. Day 12 of the trial. The morning sun filters through the high windows of Courtroom 305, casting long shadows across the worn floor. Judge Elaine Washington enters, her robe perfectly pressed despite the visible exhaustion in her eyes. For the first time since the trial began, Maxwell Stone stands with the rest, not out of respect, but calculation. His demeanor has transformed from dismissive to dangerously focused, like a predator reassessing its approach. Stone's legal team has expanded overnight. 3 additional high-profile attorneys now flank his lead counsel. Their presence signals that no expense will be spared, no legal maneuver left unexplored. The message is clear. Stone is escalating, not retreating. Judge Washington's hands tremble slightly as she reviews the morning's documents, a rare display of vulnerability noticed by the court reporters in the front row. Legal analysts from major networks whisper predictions that she'll recuse herself today, allowing Stone to restart with a potentially more favorable judge. The judicial review hanging over her has become national news, with pundits debating whether her questions to witnesses crossed lines of impartiality. The court recognizes Mr. Chen for the plaintiffs, she announces, her voice steadier than her hands. Marcus Chen rises, impeccable in his determination despite 12 grueling days. Your Honor, the plaintiffs call Richard Harmon to the stand. A murmur ripples through the gallery. Harmon had already testified. Stone's lead attorney jumps to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Harmon has completed his testimony. This appears to be an attempt to harass our witness. Before Judge Washington can rule, the courtroom doors open. Richard Harmon enters, accompanied by his own attorney, a development no one anticipated. His face is ashen, his confident executive posture replaced by the heavy step of a man carrying an unbearable weight. Your Honor, Harmon's attorney addresses the court. My client has requested to clarify his previous testimony. He has information directly relevant to these proceedings that he believes the court should hear. Stone's legal team erupts in protest, demanding a sidebar, a recess, anything to stop whatever is about to happen. Judge Washington studies Harmon's face, seeing something there that compels her to overrule the objections. Mr. Harmon is permitted to clarify his testimony in the interest of full truth. The court will hear him. Stone signals frantically to his attorneys, but it's too late. Harmon takes the stand, voice unsteady, but determined. After my testimony last week, I was contacted by associates of Mr. Stone. The courtroom falls silent. They made it clear that my future business prospects depended on how supportive my testimony had been. Stone's attorney interjects, Your Honor, this is hearsay and let him finish, Judge Washington commands, her authority filling the room. Harmon continues, I could have ignored that. I've faced pressure before. But yesterday, his voice breaks momentarily. Yesterday I learned my granddaughter Sophia was denied an internship at PrimeTech, despite exceptional qualifications. His eyes find Stone's. My granddaughter, whose mother is black. The personal connection to the case visibly shakes him, this powerful man now confronting how systemic racism touched his own family. I didn't see it before because it didn't affect me, but it was always there. With trembling hands, Harmon provides his attorney with a flash drive. These are emails showing Mr. Stone specifically directed HR to develop algorithms that would downgrade candidates from historically black colleges without appearing to do so. The discrimination wasn't just personal bias, it was systematic and intentional. Stone's lead attorney demands an immediate recess, which Judge Washington grants. In her chambers, she faces her most crucial decision. Allowing this new evidence risks fueling claims of bias against her, potentially undermining the entire case on appeal. She stands before the window, seeing her reflection superimposed over the portraits of past judges who presided in this courthouse. All white men until 1995. Her reflection appears among them, a visual reminder of how recently people like her gained positions of authority. The weight of this moment extends beyond one case, beyond one billionaire's accountability. When court resumes, Stone himself requests to address the court, a move his attorneys clearly oppose but cannot prevent. With calculated charm that has won over countless boardrooms and media profiles, he offers a substantial settlement to the plaintiffs. Your Honor, rather than prolonging this unfortunate matter, PrimeTech is prepared to offer $30 million to be divided among the plaintiffs. His voice carries the practiced sincerity of a man accustomed to buying his way out of problems. Additionally, we'll fund diversity initiatives at 10 major universities to the tune of $50 million over 5 years. A masterful move, reframing himself from villain to philanthropist without admitting wrongdoing. Several plaintiffs exchange glances, the astronomical figures clearly tempting after years of struggle and uncertainty. Desiree Reynolds stands abruptly. Your Honor, may I address my fellow plaintiffs? Judge Washington, in an unconventional move that will certainly appear in the judicial review, permits this. Briefly, Ms. Reynolds. Desiree turns to face her fellow plaintiffs, her voice quiet but carrying the power of absolute conviction. He's not offering justice, he's buying silence. Our names will be forgotten, but his will be celebrated for fixing discrimination. The same discrimination he created and profited from. Her eyes scan the faces of her fellow plaintiffs. Those diversity programs will bear his name, not ours. Future students will thank Maxwell Stone for opportunities, never knowing he was the reason those opportunities were denied to people like us in the first place. Stone's face darkens as he watches his settlement strategy unraveling before him. Unaccustomed to rejection, especially from those he considers beneath him, his carefully maintained composure finally cracks. This is why your people never get ahead. You don't know an opportunity when it's handed to you, he snaps, the mask of benevolence slipping to reveal the contempt beneath. The courtroom freezes at his words. Stone's attorneys immediately move for a mistrial, claiming Judge Washington provoked their client through improper procedure. The gallery erupts in shocked whispers. Judge Washington raises her hand, and the courtroom falls silent. Mr. Stone, she says, her voice steady and clear, this court has not forced those words from you. They were always there, waiting. What you call opportunity, this court recognizes as attempt to purchase immunity from accountability. She rises to her full height, her gaze sweeping across the courtroom before settling on Stone. I've reviewed the motion for my recusal exhaustively. The question isn't whether I as a black woman might have bias. The question is whether I can recognize that potential and still administer justice fairly. Our legal system doesn't promise judges without life experience. It promises judges who can set that aside when applying the law. The silence in the courtroom is absolute as Judge Washington delivers her ruling. Motion for recusal denied. Motion for mistrial denied. Mr. Stone's settlement offer is a matter for the plaintiffs to consider, but this court will proceed either way. She places both hands on the bench, leaning forward slightly. This courthouse has stood for 150 years. It has witnessed segregation, integration, and the ongoing struggle for true equality. It will witness justice in this case too. As she speaks these words, something shifts in Stone's expression. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he faces something his money cannot simply remove: accountability before the law. The realization transforms his face from entitlement to genuine fear, the vulnerability of a man who has never before been truly vulnerable. Judge Washington sees this transformation and recognizes its significance, but her expression remains unchanged. This isn't about Stone's personal journey. It's about justice, delayed, but perhaps finally not denied. 3 weeks later. The courtroom holds its breath as Judge Washington takes her seat. The air feels different today, heavy with anticipation and the weight of history. The plaintiffs sit together, hands clasped in solidarity. Stone's expression is unreadable, his customary arrogance replaced by something more guarded. In the matter of Reynolds et al. Versus PrimeTech Incorporated, Judge Washington begins, her voice measured and clear. The jury has reached a verdict. She reads it with steady composure. PrimeTech is found liable for systematic discrimination. The jury awards substantial damages to the plaintiffs, not the billions some predicted, but enough to be more than symbolic. More significantly, the verdict mandates comprehensive changes to the company's hiring and promotion practices, including independent oversight for 5 years. Stone sits motionless as the verdict is read, his empire not destroyed, but fundamentally altered. For the first time in his life, his wealth couldn't buy the outcome he wanted. His personal reputation, despite his PR team's efforts, has suffered damage no spin doctor can fully repair. Judge Washington concludes with remarks that will be quoted in law schools for years to come. This verdict is not about punishment, but correction. The law cannot change what people believe in their hearts, but it can and must ensure their actions don't deprive others of opportunity. True equality remains a destination we journey toward, not a place we have reached. As the courtroom clears, we see the complex reality behind the victory. Judge Washington receives notice that despite the case's successful conclusion, she has been passed over for the federal appellate court position she had been shortlisted for. Political appointees consider her too controversial now. Her victory has come at personal cost. The system extracts its price from those who challenge it, even when they win. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarm the plaintiffs. Desiree Reynolds stands at the center, composed despite the cameras and shouted questions. "Does this feel like justice?" a reporter asks. Desiree considers this. "It feels like a beginning," she answers carefully. "Justice isn't a moment, it's a process." 6 months later, we see the plaintiffs facing mixed realities. Their legal victory is significant, the financial compensation providing some with educational opportunities, others with the capital to start businesses. Yet many now find themselves labeled as troublemakers in the tech industry, their names flagged in quiet conversations between hiring managers.